This is a podcast about one woman's mission to help entrepreneurs and business owners write better business books. Each week, we tackle your writing excuses, because there are excuses too, and help you beat the blank page of doom so that you can write the book that'll grow your life and your business. Now here's your host, Vicky Fraser.
Hello and welcome to the 1000 Authors Show. I am Vicky Quinn Fraser, and today I am joined by special guest Sharon Hurley-Hall, and I'm really delighted about this because Sharon and I have chatted a bit on LinkedIn, and I've been following her work for a while, and she is very cool. She is a writer, educator, anti-racism activist, and co-host of the Introvert Sisters podcast with her sister, Lisa. And I wanted to get her onto the podcast today because she is writing her book, and it's well, you'll find out. You'll find out how it's going during the interview. But I'm just really chuffed that she's on the show, because I talk a lot about the importance of storytelling and the importance of representation and the importance of diversity in publishing. And that is one of Sharon's missions. She is committed to doing her part to eliminate racism and to amplify marginalized voices and amplify the voices of other anti-racism activists. And so it was perfect to have her on the show, and we had such a great chat. We talked about Sharon's writing process. We talked about why she became an author and an anti-racism writer in the first place, because that's not always been what she's done. And we talked about the importance of storytelling and the power it has to change the world. And we talked about what needs to change in the publishing industry and also the wonders and joys of independent publishing. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy this podcast interview as much as I enjoyed doing it. And yeah, enjoy. And also, before we start, grab a pen and paper, because Sharon and I have some great recommendations for authors and books for you to read if you would like to broaden your reading horizons and diversify your bookcase. So yeah, and all of those things, all of those books and authors will be in the show notes too. So without further ado, enjoy this podcast. I am so excited to welcome Sharon Hurley-Hall onto the 1000 Authors Show podcast. Sharon, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome.
Thank you, Vicky. I'm really happy to be here.
I've already mentioned this to you. There are so many things I want to talk to you about, because I am an introvert as well. So I would love to talk to you about that. But this is a podcast about books and writing. And so I really want to talk about what you're working on. But before I dive in, can you just introduce yourself to the reader? Tell us a bit about who you are, where you're from, what you do.
Sure, Vicky. It's not a short story, but I'll try to condense it. I am currently based in Barbados. I was born in England, so I'm British Barbadian. I am a freelance writer, and I recently pivoted to work writing mostly about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I started and launched and run an anti-racism newsletter. What else? I am the part-time diversity team lead for an edtech startup called Omnis Education.
Yeah.
And I'm the co-host of the Introvert Sisters podcast.
Which is such a great name. I love that.
Oh, name. Yes. And I have books coming out, which is why we're here.
Just a little thing. Yeah. That's so awesome. So I'm going to ask you about your book in a moment, but I think this is related to it. So you said you're a freelance writer, and that's what you do. And recently you pivoted into diversity and inclusion and anti-racism writing. Yes. Can you tell us what prompted that?
Well, what happened is George Floyd was murdered. I started writing about, I wrote a heartfelt essay called I'm Tired of Racism, because and what happened is I wrote that, people responded, and I realized I had a lot more to say, because, I spent 15 years working in offices in England, and the experience of being often the only Black person in the office or one of a few, leads to certain things. So I realized that I had a lot to share. And I also realized that there was a lot that was similar to what people that I knew were experiencing in the US and in other places. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like once I started writing about this, I found my purpose. And all of a sudden, writing about marketing, which is what I used to do, I used to write about content marketing and email marketing and social media and SEO, that did not seem as important as writing about racism and anti-racism and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and trying to use this gift of writing that I have to change things a little bit. It seemed like a really good thing to do with that skill that I had.
Yeah, it's and that's 100. I honestly can't think of a better way to change things than with the power of storytelling and the power of words, because it's where everything starts. So, I'm really excited. I'm really excited that you as well have, I think, turned that into a book, because that is the title of your upcoming book, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. I couldn't think of a better title for the book. So the book is a collection of some of the essays from the first year of my newsletter, which I launched in August 2020. So towards the end of that year, I started putting a collection together. And the title essay just seemed obvious to me. That seemed the obvious way, because that's the whole thing. I am tired of racism. I want us to get beyond it. I want us to solve it. I want allies to think of things they can do to help shift the narrative, help people feel more empathy and understanding, concentrate on our shared humanity. And so it seemed the obvious title to really just make people focus on this terrible, terrible problem that we have with racism, especially anti-Black racism around the world. And so the interesting thing about this book is I started putting it together in late 2020. And I'd had this idea that I was going to work with a small publisher and bring it out last year. And, small publishers, small family-owned publishers, family things happen. Let's leave it at that. Family things happened and it didn't come out. And so I decided I'm going to self-publish it. So I'm at the stage now where I have had the main manuscript edited. Thank you, Dragonfly Editorial. I am waiting for the foreword, which Shanti Martin, who you've probably come across on LinkedIn, is writing. As soon as that's done, I will be in a position to get the book out there.
That's so exciting. I am always so excited when women publish books, and especially women of color and Black women, because there are not enough of them. And I'm going to ask you a few questions in a little while about the state of traditional publishing, particularly because it needs the table flipping. But I would like to ask you first about how you found the writing process itself, because writing a book is very different from writing essays and articles and things. So I'm always really interested to talk to people about how have you found the book writing process?
In some ways, it wasn't difficult because it was an essay collection. So I had the basic materials there. And anyone who writes for a living, if you're a freelance writer, journalist, or whatever, you're used to delivering on demand. So when I started the newsletter and I said, okay, I'm going to publish X number of times a week, I always had something ready on the day of publication. So I had material to choose from. And so the editing process, deciding what to select, and also making sure, because I wanted people who buy the book and who have subscribed to the newsletter to also get something that they hadn't already seen. So I still had to have a few new pieces, which I do. And so the difficult part of the process was not so much the writing, but trying to work out how to piece them together and pull out common themes.
Yeah.
Right. And so I ended up doing that. And then when I started working with an editor, and if you get the chance to work with a professional editor for your book, it is always a good idea, right? Absolutely. Even if you're self-publishing,
yeah,
right? Then, they made a couple of suggestions about where I could move pieces of content around where they seemed to fit better. And I agreed with them because it was something I hadn't seen myself. Mm-hmm. And so I've ended up with, a few themes. Common ones include working while Black, right? Because I live in Barbados and I spent some time here as a child. I lived here between the ages of 12 and my early 20s before I went back to the UK, and then before I returned here. And so I have a few essays that talk about that experience as well. Some stuff about parenting. And then there's some things that didn't really fit anywhere, but are nonetheless important slices of life, I think.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a fantastic eclectic collection of kind of pure storytelling, and also the essays that I know you write for your newsletter, because I've obviously been reading that for a while. So it's going to be really interesting, I think.
Yeah, it's very story based, especially with this collection, because I started out telling stories from my experience and sharing experiences from people that I knew, right? Because, my sister, for example, lives in New Jersey. I have friends who have lived in and worked in different countries. And, we talk about racism. And so I had plenty of stories to tell. And one of the things that I try to do is reinforce the commonality. It's not about, racism in America is so much worse, or racism in England is so much better. There's some very common experiences no matter where you're experiencing. And I'm not sure anybody can pat themselves on the back yet in relation to racism.
Yeah. 100%. So how did you find, I've got many questions. I'm going to try and not throw them at you in a machine gun kind of fashion. But how did you find working with an editor? I'm just going to pull that out. Did you enjoy the process?
I did enjoy the process. And, my background is in journalism, so I'm used to working with editors.
Yeah.
So I'm not precious about anything that makes the work better. When I started working as a journalist, the first 6 months, I'd get my work back from my editor and there'd be red pen, change this, fix that, sort that. And the day that I got one back with just a grunt, I thought, okay, I'm getting somewhere now. My writing's improving. So I think it's a really good thing to do if you find the right editor, somebody that can understand the work, somebody that makes the work better without changing your voice. And I was really lucky to work with someone like that. So it was a joy.
Yeah. And I think that's quite a rare thing as well, to find an editor who is willing to trust the writer to let their voice shine, but also, the light touch to kind of make it better.
Exactly. So important. And it really worked well in this case.
Oh, fantastic. So let's talk a little bit more about storytelling then, because you said that everything that you write is very story driven and it's all kind of comes from you and your experiences. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about because I know that you talked about this a lot recently, the empathy gap, and particularly how you feel that storytelling can help to bridge that gap and like you said, make the world a better place.
Absolutely. I think when stories help us to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes, to use our imagination to transport us into a different world in a way. And so I think that telling stories can really help people start to feel that empathy. One of the most popular pieces that I did was called "What If the Tables Were Turned?" And I invited people to walk themselves through the whole process of enslavement to the present day and imagine if that had happened to them and their family, and cited some common experiences that happen to Black people on a daily basis. And I think a lot of people really related to that because they could say, well, yeah, if somebody ripped my children away from me and sold them into a different country and I never saw them again, yes, that would be traumatic. If people did that over generations, that would be extremely traumatic. If I went to an African country and they told me that I had to tie up my blonde straight hair into Bantu knots or otherwise my hair was not professional, right? And I think just putting it in those really stark terms, here are the kinds of things that Black people go through. What would happen if you were going through them? Would that actually make any sense at all? Would that be something that you would find acceptable? And so, yes, I think storytelling is a powerful tool. Of course, now I mix it up a bit because part of it is storytelling and part of it is about what's happening now, right? Like the one that you mentioned, the empathy gap, right? Talking about what's happening in relation to Ukraine and how Black and brown people are being treated and how refugees of different skin shades are treated generally. Yeah. And I think the difficult thing with that many white people in particular have difficulty with is, we all want to think we're great people. We all want to think we're not racist. We all want to think we've got it sorted in relation to things like racism and fighting discrimination. But the truth is that all of us, and I include myself in this, have grown up in a world that says that, white is right and white is best in a white supremacist system. So we're fighting that conditioning every day. Yeah. Right. And that applies whether you are in a white majority space or a formerly colonized space. by the way. Right? I live in Barbados. Barbados is a Black majority country, but there's still this historical privileging of whiteness that happens, right? Yeah. And so I think it's really important to tell those stories and make people aware of the human cost of things like racism.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, like you say, storytelling is an incredibly powerful tool. And I wonder if it's not really the only way to do it, is to, like you say, draw people into this idea of just take and put yourself in, just take a second to question what you've been told, question your worldview, to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Because I know that it's something that I have to pull myself up on all the time. It's like, hang on a minute, why am I thinking this? Where's this coming from? And it just takes that little bit of extra effort. And I think when you hear it in a story, especially storytelling from somebody who's been there and lived it, it's so much more powerful if you can like open your ears and open your eyes and listen to it. So yeah, the storytelling element, I'm just very passionate about storytelling, obviously, but I'm really excited about your book coming out, because I just think it's important, and I think it's going to make a big difference.
I certainly hope so. I certainly hope that people are going to. I think there's also a power in the collection aspect of it.
Yeah,
you get you have your newsletter and it comes out a couple of times a week and so on. But actually, when you have 20 something different essays sharing aspects of this experience, I think that has a power as well.
Yeah, definitely. So have you found on LinkedIn that there's been a lot of anticipation and excitement for your book?
There's been some anticipation and excitement. I was quite amazed actually, because I did a post about the fact that I had decided to self-publish after the other thing hadn't worked out. And, that was seen by thousands of people who said, okay, so is it ready for pre-order yet? Where can I sign up? And of course, I wasn't there yet. I was just, I was telling a story about something that happened to me, as I do. And so I had not laid the groundwork for any of that at all. And, I'm still working on the nitty gritty parts. I've managed to hopefully unlock my ISBN. My husband and I had got a batch of ISBNs a few years ago because we had some self-publishing projects in mind. And so I knew I had an ISBN knocking around somewhere, and we'd had trouble with the last project on, in getting Amazon to accept it. So we, had to send some emails back and forth and get that. It's like little nitty gritty admin things.
Yeah. Right? People don't realize.
Yes. I have to write the blurb, which I'm going to do once I get the foreword, because I'll probably use a bit of the foreword as part of the blurb. I have to condense my bio a little bit. I do have a bio. I have a bio that I used on my last book, because I wrote a book about colorism called Exploring Shadism. So I have a bio on there. But things have changed since then. So, you always have to keep these things up to date. Yeah. And I'm hoping to persuade the guy that did the front cover for me to do the back cover for me. So we'll see.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. And so I'm close. I'm hoping that I'm going to be able to have it available for pre-order within the next month.
Amazing.
And then before the middle of the year, it will actually be available for purchase. And I'm going to do a paperback version and an ebook.
Fantastic. Amazing. So what made you decide? Because I know you had the issue with the publisher that you originally went with, but what made you decide to independently publish? So I'm a massive champion for indie publishing, but I want to know why you decided to indie publish. It's something
that when I was wearing my other hat, as when I started in journalism, when I started in freelancing, one of my early gigs was reviewing web apps. And one of the things I reviewed really early was Kindle Direct Publishing. And so I tried it out by self-publishing a book about blogging, which, even though it is massively out of date, still sells the occasional copy, right? And so I've always found the self-publishing process pretty straightforward. Well, on Amazon, anyway. I'm actually going to try a couple of different things this time, which I can talk about in a minute if you're interested in that.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think it was a question of time, is because I had done the collection at the end of 2020, and I was now at the beginning of 2022. I didn't want to then wait another year, or more, to get a traditional publishing contract. And, by then, I'd be looking at 2023 before it came out. And I felt it was a better idea to do it myself because I knew I could get it out there because I have people that are interested, including my newsletter subscribers who are now at, 1,500 plus, right? Get it out there to those people that were really interested. And, when I do the next collection, because there will be another one, I have the option at that point to go a different publishing route.
Yeah.
I don't know if I will. I think there are a number of, having full control of the process is good. But you have to not let it go to your head and recognize what you can and can't do, what you are and are not expert in. Sometimes you need help with designing the book. It really pays to get a professional design cover. It really pays to get professional editing. If you're good with tech, then, the sort of uploading and all that kind of thing you can do yourself. If you're a good writer, you can write descriptions. There's a marketing piece that traditional publishing would take care of for you partly, but you have to take care of yourself. But again, I've been writing about marketing. I'm not saying I'm a total expert. I always hesitate to call myself an expert in things because things change all the time. But I know enough about marketing to be able to give the book a good head start. Let's say that. There were more pros than cons for me. And of course, when you publish it yourself, you keep most of the royalties.
Yes.
You get 70% of it instead of, 10, 15%.
If you're lucky. Yeah.
Right? If you're lucky, right? If you're lucky. And so this time around, what I'm doing differently, or what I'm going to do is I am still going to self-publish on Amazon, but I'm also going to probably use something like, I'm leaning towards direct to digital so that I can get it into some other marketplaces and so on. Right?
Yeah.
Like Ingram and some of the others.
Yeah, I love Ingram.
Right. So that's sort of a new part of it for me. And I haven't yet fully explored how that's going to work. I'm still, I'm hemming and hawing between, should I just do it to Amazon first because I know I can get that done, then have it available for pre-order and then do the other bit. I haven't worked it out yet.
Yeah. Well, if you put it on Ingram, just as an aside, they will distribute it to Amazon for you. So that cuts out that step. So.
That is true. I am wondering, I have to dig down into the weeds.
Yeah.
Because I have an Amazon author profile. I have my books on it already. So I need to make sure that when I put it on, if I use another tool and they distribute it to Amazon, it all meshes so that I don't have to, I don't have 3 versions of Sharon Hurley-Hall out there on Amazon,
That is a really good point for anybody listening as well. Just, make sure that your tech meshes.
Yes,
not meshes.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, so that's really exciting. I love indie publishing for all of those reasons, but also because it cuts out the gatekeepers. Because I read a piece the other day, and somebody had written something about how she had been congratulated on her book, and she was a bit reticent. She's like, "Well, it's only indie published," and it just made me clutch my head because it's like only indie published, and it just it's like because
yeah.
These arbiters of what is worthy of being published, who, let's be honest, are mostly dusty old white dudes still.
Yes.
And so, the publishing industry needs a big shake-up, and I think it's getting it from the indie industry. So I was going to ask you, sorry, you're trying to say something.
No, I'm waiting for your question.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, what do you think needs to change in the traditional publishing industry?
Like everything.
Yeah. I mean, apart from everything.
Apart from everything, we need more diversity. Yeah. We need more Black and brown people commissioning and editing. We need fewer gatekeepers. We need a recognition that indie publishing is valid publishing. I mean, this is not a fly-by-night thing anymore. This is not a fad. People are doing it. People are using it as a stepping stone into traditional publishing, and some people are not bothering with that stepping stone at all. They're just publishing their stuff, and they're reaching millions of people. Yeah. So I think the traditional publishing industry needs to stop being so up itself, and recognize that there are other people, right? Other people, other ways, and other voices, especially other voices, because it's hard, especially if you are not also an old white dude, if you are not somebody who already has a following. In many cases, traditional publishing doesn't want to know.
No.
Right. And the beauty of indie publishing is that you don't have to listen to them on that front. You can go direct to your audience, right? If you already have, your social media audience, your newsletter audience, or whatever, then you might already have, a potential of 10,000, 100,000 people that might be interested in your book.
Yeah.
Right. And you don't actually need to sell that many to make a success in terms of what the traditional publishers are looking at. Not everybody is going to be, Stephen King, right? Okay, not everyone is going to be James Patterson. And isn't it interesting that, I think of old white dudes again, right?
Yeah.
We can take back that power.
Yeah.
And we can go direct to our audiences, and we can use different ways of reaching people and promoting our books. We don't have to go do the so-called tried and true, because they may not be tried and true for us.
No, exactly.
People that look like me are not going to find it that easy to get a book deal until their success is already proven.
Yeah, they've proven themselves. Yeah,
exactly. Which is again, gatekeepers.
Yeah, again, gatekeepers. And just I had a thought, it's left my head. It probably wasn't that important. But yeah, once again, it's down to hearing those different voices and just getting people into the room who are going to listen for those different voices and then put them out there. Because I also think that the traditional publishing industry, as it is at the moment, is incredibly short-sighted from a business point of view, because there's this idea that the only stories that people want to hear are stories by people who look like me. That's simply not true. It's simply not true. And also, nor am I the only audience out there. It's just...
Yeah, I mean, when I think about it, 95% of the books that I read or have access to have white protagonists, are written by white people.
Yeah.
You can find books, you find books by Black and brown people. They do exist. They are out there. You can choose to find them, but they don't actually represent, as far as I can tell, the majority of the publishing industry. Right. It's more, it's the Hollywood model, right? It's like, Fast and Furious 1 was a success. Let's make 10 more. Right.
Yeah.
And there's this sort of cookie cutter approach. And I think that you miss out on so much value, so many interesting perspectives when you take that approach.
You do.
And I think that's why indie publishing is, disrupts that narrative. Because people go out and they buy these books and they enjoy them and they talk about them and they get value from them.
Yeah.
Right. And, I think we ourselves have to unlearn that, because that idea of a traditional publishing deal still has a cachet. And I'm not saying that, if you get one, by all means celebrate it. I would. Right?
Hand off. I absolutely would. But
I would.
Yeah.
But I'm also not waiting for them to decide that I'm worthy.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. And like you said, I remember the thought that escaped my head. It's like you said that, the first two really well-known authors that you thought of are, middle-aged, middle-class white dudes. And that's, they're great writers, all the rest of it. But it's like, that shouldn't be the way it is. There should be other writers that spring off the top of your, off the top of your head. And I know that my bookshelves are much more diverse than they were, but I know that I've had to go out and like make an effort to find them. And I also know that it shouldn't have to be that way. That shouldn't be the way it is. It's
yes.
It shouldn't be considered niche. It should be
everything should be in there. Everything should be in the mix.
Yeah.
And, I could talk about one of my pet peeves if you do you want me to talk about a pet peeve?
Please, bring me your pet peeve.
One of my pet peeves is around anti-racism writing, and the fact that there's a white woman that's often at the top of the bestseller list when there are Black authors with both academic credentials and lived experience who are more deserving of that top spot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I could name, why isn't, Ijeoma Olo, Afua Hirsch, Rennie Edo Lodge, all of those people should be higher up the lists.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
No, and you're 100% right. I'm like, I'm hoping that people are kind of listening to this and thinking, yeah, okay, we've got the Jane Elliots of the world and that's great, but why are they, and they can write their books, but why are they at the top of the list? Because they haven't lived the experience. And,
exactly.
It seems like brainer, but it's clearly not still.
And yeah, there's somehow this idea, and, again, I think traditional publishing, like much of society, has to learn it, but, a Black writer is somehow a lesser thing. A brown writer is somehow a lesser creature. And that's not the case at all. Hey, we practice our writing like every other writer. If as a Black writer, I've been writing since I was 15. Okay, like most other writers today, you start writing in your teen years, sometimes earlier. And, sure, what you write at that age might be crap, but the fact is that you're consistently practicing your writing, right? You have academic credentials sometimes, not that you need them for writing, but, some of us have them as well. Mm-hmm. So we have to unlearn that mindset, and we have to value people equally and give the value to the people that deserve it more as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
If you're talking about anti-racism, if you're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, you have to be learning from Black and brown people too. You have to be learning from LGBTQ plus people. You have to be learning from trans people. You have to be learning from people that have the lived experience as well, because otherwise it's just academic to you.
Yeah.
And that's not good enough, frankly.
It's not. It isn't. And I think that is a perfect note to end on. It's not good enough. It needs to bloody change. And I know that your book is gonna hopefully make big inroads into making that happen. I'm really excited about it. So I could talk to you all day about all manner of things, but we are running out of time. So I have a few quickfire questions for you. But before I do that, can I just ask, and this is based on, there are incredible Black and brown writers out there who are not getting the recognition they deserve. So if any of my listeners are wondering, okay, where do I start? Who is your go-to? Who is your go-to author?
Ooh. It's difficult to find a go-to because there are so many. Ibram X. Kendi, How to Be an Anti-Racist. Ijeoma Ulo, I think is hers, Why I'm No Longer Talking to People About Race, or is that Rennie Edolodge? They have two books with similar titles. Right, yeah. So that's another one. I found Afua Hirsch's book, British, really, really interesting as well. Yeah. And a book by Michelle Mi-jung Kim called The Wake Up, which is about allyship. And it's a really, really good book. She is Asian American woman, I believe. Mm-hmm. So those are good starting points.
Fabulous. Thank you. And I'm also going to throw in, just because I have to, Toni Morrison, Octavia E. Butler, because
yes,
looking at fiction as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Because I'm a massive fan of
Alice Walker's poetry.
Yes, Alice Walker's poetry. Yeah, N.K. Jemisin for the fantasy fans out there. Love her.
Yes. So Maya Angelou, of course, can never go wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so Angela Davis has a new book out, which I have not read yet, but it's on my to-be-read pile, a new collection of essays, I believe. So that's something, if you're looking for something brand new, that would be a good place to start. It's certainly something I plan to read.
Awesome.
One more.
Yeah.
Nicole, if you're, for those who are listening who are, more interested in the US context, I've just started reading the 1619 Project book by Nicole Hannah-Jones, which gives an alternative story of the presence of Black people in America and a different start to when enslavement started. It's a really interesting book. It's heavy. I have to read a couple of chapters and put it down. Yeah. But it is really, really interesting. And that's also a collection of essays by people who really know their stuff.
Amazing. That is, so anyone listening who wants to widen your reading horizons, that is plenty to start with there. And I'm going to get Podfly there. I'm going to ask them now. Podfly, if you can list those out for us, that would be amazing. Thank you. And put them in the show notes. But right, I'm going to dive into my rapid fire questions. I'm just going to throw them at you. Just first thing that comes off the top of your head, Sharon, would be great. What are you reading right now?
Well, apart from the 1619 Project, I have just been finishing up the Jeffrey Deaver Lincoln Rhyme series. Okay. I like psychological thrillers.
Okay, cool. And what is I'm not going to say the favourite book, because for me it depends on my mood, but what is a favourite book of yours?
Ooh. I really love Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach. it's an interesting book because it's all about transformation and bettering yourself through the story of a seagull. I think it was written in the 70s or 80s, but it's a book that I keep going back to.
Ooh, I shall dig that out and have a look. Thank you. And along the same lines, favorite film, a film that you've loved?
Shawshank Redemption.
Great film. And what was the last thing you binge watched, if that is a thing that you do?
Yes. What was the last thing that I binge watched? I think it was Clickbait.
Oh, okay.
On Netflix.
Good. Worth it?
Yeah, pretty interesting, actually. Pretty interesting. Yeah.
I will add that to my watch list. Thank you. And what's your favorite place?
My favorite place is like a quiet Caribbean beach.
Nice.
With a palm tree, so there's shade, and where the water is crystal clear.
Oh,
luckily we have plenty of those in Barbados.
Yeah, I'm looking out of my window now at the pouring rain and the grey skies. Yeah, that sounds perfect. Okay, next question. What does power mean to you?
Ooh. Power is about agency and the ability to change things and shape your world.
Love it. Love that answer. Thank you. What are you thankful for right now?
Actually, you know what I'm thankful for? My sister and I put out a call for help with our podcast, and somebody answered the call, and we got a sponsor and who's helping with all the post-production stuff. And I am so incredibly grateful for Janelle Benjamin, of all things Equitable, because she was the first person to step up. And it makes such a difference and you'll know yourself having a podcast, it makes such a difference to have help with those things.
Yes, it does. It does. I saw that post on LinkedIn and I was just like, yes. What are you most proud of?
Ooh, that's a tough question. Can I have more than one answer?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm proud of our podcast, The Introvert Sisters. I'm proud of the newsletter. I'm proud of my daughter, who's, she's currently studying linguistics at Manchester Uni. She's a lovely human being, honestly. And, I know I'm her mother, but, and I'm proud of myself in a way for stepping into this work and trying to make a difference.
Awesome. Amazing. And complete about face. What's on your bedside table?
A lamp and a glasses case. And in my top drawer, my Kindle. Because I read every day. Amazing.
Okay. And that concludes my rapid fire questions. You'll probably be relieved to know. Thank you so much for sharing so generously. I really enjoy asking people those questions because they're so illuminating. But before we say goodbye, where can we find out more about you? Where is the best place for people to go to find out more about you?
Go to antiracismnewsletter.com or sharonhh.com.
Lovely. And both of those links will be in my show notes, along with links to all of your social media handles as well, because I know I've got your LinkedIn, your Twitter, and your Instagram. So I'll make sure that people get hold of those.
Great.
But absolutely, if you're listening and you're thinking that you would like to hear more from Sharon, and you absolutely should, definitely sign up for her anti-racism newsletter. It's fantastic. It's a fantastic read. It's really eye-opening, educational, and just delightful to read as well. It's a real delight to read. So thank you for producing that.
Thank you, Vicky.
And thank you, Sharon, so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been a real pleasure to interview you, and I'm really excited about your book.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Vicky.
Amazing. I'm going to get you back at some point as well after the book's out, so people can look forward to that.
Great.
Thank you again. Thank you so much for listening to the 1000 Authors Show. Thank you for listening to my chat with Sharon. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned a few things that will help you. And I also really urge you to sign up for Sharon's newsletter at the antiracismnewsletter.com. Sorry, www.antiracismnewsletter.com. It's very modest payment. It's $5 a month, which is such a bargain. And you can also find out more about Sharon at sharonhh.com. And she's easily findable on LinkedIn. She's on twitter.com as S Hurley-Hall, and she's on Instagram.com moxie.com as S Hurley-Hall 2. All of those links are in the show notes, so go find out more about Sharon and her book, and you will be among the first to know when her book is published, which is fantastic. And I will be back next week with Joe, and we will be talking about something to do with writing. Not sure what yet, but in the meantime, if you want to get into a writing habit, you can grab my free writing prompt calendar from moxiebooks.co.uk/calendar, and I urge you to do so. Otherwise, if you've listened to every episode, please email me with your postal address and I will send you a special gift. And if you like this podcast, please go to iTunes and subscribe. It helps us to climb the rankings. If you know someone who will enjoy this podcast, send them a link. moxiebooks.co.uk/podcast. And of course, remember to go and check out Sharon's work and Sharon's podcast as well. Thank you so much to Podfly. Thank you so much to Harriet for always having my back. Thank you so much again to Sharon for joining me. And thank you to you, dear listener, for being on the other side of this microphone. I will be back same time next week. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening. You can find links and show notes on the website at moxiebooks.co.uk/podcast, where you can also sign up for the best daily emails in the multiverse and find loads of free resources to help you write your book. We'll be back the same time next week with more tales from the book writing trenches and the latest on what the tiny sheeps have been up to.